Jedi business, go back to your drinks.
Welcome. All are welcome. Old fans, new fans. Thank you once again for coming to another episode of Jedi Business. Joining me again, Paulie Darth Zartan. How are
Hey,
you?
good. Yourself?
I am feeling much better than last week. Not quite
Good.
100, but on the road to mending. We are, of course, going to be talking some Acolyte today. And I had actually come across a couple Star Wars in the news items this week that I wanted to bring up to you. But of course, we got some crazy stuff happening in real life right now. And while this show is Star Wars related, it's not political, and I'm not going to try to be political here. I just want to speak a little bit about how polarized everything's become in this country. People think it's just politics, but it's not. You see it in the Star Wars community. It's almost like a war between old Star Wars fans and new Disney fans. And it's not even just disagreeing, there's just outright terrible things said about each other. You see it in sports, you see it all over. So, in light of what happened today, and again, I'm not going to name any names, I'm not getting political. You believe what you want to believe, you vote who you want to vote for. I think we all need to just learn to take a step back, especially when we're online. It's easy to just fire off a tweet or a post. It's like we're not even realizing that there's another person on the other end. So maybe before you send out that message or whatever, you take a second before you do that and just remember that that is someone else on the other end. Imagine if they were in front of you, would you be willing to say the same things? Because just a complete disregard for civility, just complete disregard for just being civil with each other. We can all disagree on the Acolyte. I mean, look at this. Just for example, I'm for the most part enjoying watching it, but I have tremendous criticism of it. I actually today, Paul, just to bring it down a little bit, Paul, someone called me a Disney shill, and I just stared at that tweet. I'm like, huh? Me, of all people, a Disney shill, because I've been highly critical of this show. But anyways, just wanted to say that we need to let the air out of the tires. The pressure's too high. If we keep going the way we are, there's gonna be an explosion. And I'm hoping we can all just start with ourselves. It starts with me, it starts with you. Take a step back on what we say or how we say it.
Those are all good points. I mean, I'm not going to really add a whole lot to it other than just saying I think there's certainly some truth to all that in terms of just the sort of where society finds itself. And part of that is, like you said, it's just too easy, I think, for people to just fire a text or an email off, where in the old days it was either communicated by, you could do a letter, you could do a phone call, you could do it in person, but generally you didn't have a lot of time to edit or, it was kind of like, look, there it is. And then you just dealt with it, which is probably why most people either kept their mouth shut or they said, okay, here's my 2 cents. And then, whatever happened after that happened. But it's just a different time we find ourselves in, that's for sure.
Exactly. But anyways, I don't want to get too serious. There's enough seriousness in the world. We'll bring it back to the Acolyte. And this is episode 7. So basically, we knew that either they're going to have to do it in the final episode or this episode, was basically explain all the stuff they've been hinting at pretty much since day one, but especially since after the episode 3, when they went back to Brendock and showed the fire and all that happened. I'll be honest with you. Before I started to watch this episode, Paul, I hesitated to watch it. I hesitated to push play because I just kept thinking, the worst thing that Star Wars ever did for me personally was that movie, the episode 8. I'm not even going to say the name of the movie, but they just destroyed a character in Luke Skywalker for me. Anyway,
Yeah.
They desecrated that character, and the way they've been hinting at things, I just felt, well, are they going to destroy the Jedi by showing them as? I mean, they almost setting them up to be like this. They're the Europeans coming to the continent and finding the Native Americans and just barging all in and thinking they knew what's best for them. That's kind of how they're hinting that things were going to play out with the Jedi. That they just busted in and took Osha and breaking in. But we'll get to that. And
Right.
So I was just really hesitant to watch it because, wow, they're going to show the Jedi to be bad, like which we had talked about earlier. And if anything, they just showed this group of Jedi to be a bunch of doofuses.
Yeah, I mean, I just to kind of jump in, I felt the same way, and it just feels a little bit disjointed because I think everything that led up to the Phantom Menace was kind of, I think, at least in Lucas's mind's eye. And granted, clearly understand that Disney's taken over the franchise, but in his mind's eye, that's where things started going off the rails. I mean, granted, you could argue there was a slow build, but 87-year gap, which is what I believe it is from this TV series to episode one or the Phantom Menace. That's a pretty wide gap. In other words, I think leaving it at episode one would have probably been sufficient, but they're almost making these. This is an old reference, over 100 years old, but like a Keystone Cops, it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, wait a second, why, all of a sudden are they incompetent? They're highly emotional. They can't make rational decisions. It just feels like, completely contrary to what we all believed, at least, prior to Disney taking over, what the Jedi were all about. So.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I agree. That's a good reference, Keystone Cops. But okay, let's basically start it off. Okay, it starts off on they're back on Brandok. Okay, so we're getting the, which is it's weird because we're getting the flashback episode again, and I had been hearing online people saying I actually heard this from Christian Harloff and a couple other people, um, or them saying they could have almost left the twins out and just made it a show about the stranger, and just made it about him and Soul and that type of deal. It's almost like the twins have become irrelevant in their own show because all the interesting part is dealing with him as opposed to
In other words, they were kind of, it was introduced as a surprise early on, and then now it's kind of become more of an afterthought. And then, of course, it appears as though in the last episode, right, there's going to be the ultimate twist or something. But
yeah.
we'll see what happens. But
It goes again. What I've said is that these episodes they got these multiple stories going on, but they don't have time to tell them, and it goes again to these episodes being so short. But then the more that I've thought about it, just since that episode, I've really thought about what you said, and it really just comes down to bad writing.
yeah,
It really just comes down. They have I mean extreme motivation changes from 1 second to the next. You go from I'm gonna do this to the very next scene I'm doing this. It might have made sense where if there was a buildup or tension between them, struggle, but it just doesn't make any sense. You go from like last episode, what the heck is Osha doing with what's his name? When I'm thinking about it, he just killed all her childhood friend Yord, Jackie, who she has just become. She just murdered all these people that she knows, and yet because she sees them naked, oh well, hey, there's
yeah. Again,
tension
it just
there.
doesn't make any sense, and that's why I said it's just poor writing. And if the showrunner involved, had anything to say about this, which I know she did, um, she should have been smarter, in my opinion, as far as her approach to this whole thing. I guess maybe again, I don't know where the approval process sort of happens as far as who and how many people weigh in on it. Is it a committee? Is it one person? My guess is some kind of a committee. You've got different groups there within Disney and within the hierarchy that probably sign off on this stuff. But it's just, I guess in their mind, they probably figured, hey, this looks like a good opportunity to kind of spin things in a new direction. But there's just some inconsistencies, and there's some real problems, I think, that we've pointed out all along that just hamper this show, that just really kind of make it second or third tier Star Wars, in my opinion.
Exactly. And okay, so we're back on Brendok. I can understand them being in a scientific mission, but I gotta agree, it just looked a little ridiculous to see Kelnaka out there with the metal detector, like he's out on the beach searching for coins or something.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that. I just went through the episode again the other day, and I was writing some notes down, and that's like the first thing I have up there. Again, not that I need to know, but I would be curious to see what exactly they were doing. I can only imagine, that
Yeah, well,
certain.
they're supposedly searching for the virgins, but the virgins in the force, but that's a spiritual thing. They keep pushing it too much to a scientific thing, which I understand with the midi chlorians and all that. Oh, they tried to make it a little more scientific, and they're doing these tests on the plants and whatever. But it's just they're searching for a virgin.
Well,
Maybe they should be meditating or something
well,
like
no, no.
that.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of the confusion that I have as a viewer, not as a reviewer, but as a viewer watching it. I'm trying to put my mind in the frame of, or kind of where where you would be as a viewer watching this, thinking, well, it looks like they're looking for a certain mineral or something physical, like they're trying.
Exactly. Physical.
What's the makeup of the plant? Because he kept shoving moss and other things, plant matter and stuff into that box, and that was apparently analyzing it. But to me, neither one of those functions or features, whether you've got a sweeper or whether you have that box that's analyzing, to me, neither one of those exactly in no way would determine what is part of a quote unquote virgins. And that, I guess, is a new concept. I think,
Actually, it's not. But we'll get back to that. But it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you take it as a life out of nothing, which is what effectively Palpatine had done with Anakin. I mean, to me,
Anakin was a virgin.
But I think it seems as though they're trying to use this as the opportunity to introduce that concept. And I guess some have postured that, if there is a second season, that you'd see Plagueis, and obviously we know where that whole storyline would go. But this just doesn't feel like this is how you would be searching for something like that. I agree with you.
But we get that out there, and then you figured they got to have some sort of test for the Jedi, because you get, gosh, what's his name? Corbin, the Padawan, and he's out there whining. And they've only been there 7 weeks. What does he want to go back to Coruscant for? He's out on an adventure, and he's just, I just want to go home.
I mean, I got a few notes on that too, as far as where that led to in terms of where, once they got inside the citadel or the castle or whatever you want to call that compound. But yeah, it just, again, I can understand why a Padawan might feel a little bit more emotionally driven to
7 months. Okay, if they're out in the Outer Rim for 7 months, okay, yeah, I might want to freaking go home. But 7 weeks.
Yeah, no, again, it's just it's where the direction of the writing, I guess, is. But
one thing that was kind of cool that they reference, if you're a High Republic reader, of course, they were saying that planet had been the setting for a disaster, a hyperspace disaster, and that, of course, I believe happened in the very first High Republic book, the hyperspace disaster. And so they were saying it was all wiped out, and that they didn't know why things were growing back, which was that was kind of neat, a little Easter egg if you're reading the High Republic. It's just, again, Corbin with their plants. There are plants here, big deal. I mean, he did not seem very Jedi-like. He's
right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, obviously he's well. You see him fight later, so obviously he's been well trained. Obviously he's not just some dumb kid, but I don't know. It just the way they played it off. He just seemed a little too whiny about. It's like, what does he want to just go kick back in Coruscant? He's out on an adventure.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, of the 4 Jedi that were on that planet in this last episode, the only one that acts like one and certainly speaks like one is going to be Master Andara. But, I wish we had subtitles. Someone should figure out there could be subtitles under Shriwalk, which I guess is the Wookiee language. I mean, by now you would
begin in Shriwalk.
Yeah, I mean, someone should be able to figure that out by now. But it just felt like both the kid, or I should say the Padawan, and Saul just completely now is clearly, in my mind, he's got no business being a Jedi Knight. I mean,
what the hell? And his obsession with Osha that just turns on a dime instantly. Okay, they set it up. Okay, he sees her. Okay, and he thinks she might be in danger. And when he goes and he sneaks in there, which I will get to that too, he sees them talking and that there might be a ceremony. So obviously they're trying to put it that he thinks they might be in danger, but his just sudden push, like, I got to have Osha, I got to save her. It's like, it almost came across as creepy.
That's a good scene. At the second time, that's kind of how I interpret it more. Was a little bit creepy old man, or, well, considering the age difference, a creepy old man,
Yeah, well, was he just pissed off because Andara joked that he didn't have a Padawan, and he's over there telling Osha there's hundreds and thousands of kids like this at the temple or whatever. There's hundreds of kids. It's like, okay, all those hundreds, and you've never found a Padawan. Obviously, you're not meant to. The council didn't see fit to give you a Padawan, even when they forced one on Anakin.
Right.
When
well,
he didn't want them, you can't get a Padawan. Maybe you don't deserve one.
Well, and that's why it was pretty clear to me. I mean, just by I guess, the team behind the show could say, well, see, that's part of the reason why we wanted to create a character like this. But I'm like, again, that's inconsistent, poor writing, inconsistent with what the Jedi are and what a Jedi would do and how they would act. And again, he broke into that compound 2 or 3 times, and I'm kind of
Oh
like,
gosh,
what,
dude.
what would have forced him to break into it the first time, other than that pure emotion to get the kid out of there?
Exactly.
To me, if he was at least a Jedi Knight, he would be savvy enough to say, hey, I'm going to go back, talk to Andara. If we can go in as a group, fine. If not, then we just have to wait until we get approval from the council. And obviously, she later says, hey, that's not something they would be in favor of. But yeah, I don't know if you're going to go there next. I just felt that whole thing was a
Yeah,
little disjointed as
exactly.
well.
And so he breaks in, which it doesn't make sense why he would do that. And then, okay, he starts to say, I mean, he says later, but when he's out there looking at the kids, the first season, and Corin shows up, he doesn't seem like she's in trouble. She sounds like, okay, this is a mother figure telling her kids, hey, you better get back in because it's dangerous out here. Why
Right,
would he automatically assume that they're in danger just because how she looks? I mean, is that
right.
kind of like a time thing they're going to? Soul just seems so inconsistent. It's like,
But then
again,
when I
go ahead.
put my hopes on Indara saying, okay, she's going to be the bigger person here, or the better Jedi.
Okay,
Then
wait. We'll
yeah.
get to, we'll get
Oh,
to that in a second. Let's go to the next part. Okay, so before we get in there, before she sends Soul off, they're talking, and of course that's when she says, "That is why you don't have a Padawan." But she says that because she gets a little pissed off that Soul told Corbin the answer why they were there, the virgins, where Indara's was like, "I do not tell him the answer. He needs to seek it for himself." It's like, well, I don't know. I could see that's a different style of teaching. I don't necessarily agree with that style of teaching, but okay. And so then Soul goes off. He sees him using the Force, so obviously is interested. And then he sees Coral, like I said, kind of scolding them. But it doesn't seem to me like they're in danger. Just like I said, like a mother scolding her children. Hey, get back
yeah.
inside. So then, like you said, Soul shows up at their place. Why are there no cameras there? We have cameras now. I got a ring. They can't have a ring camera out there to see if there's some Jedi poking around. And then, like you said, he just decides to break in. What would possess? Okay, maybe if he saw them being whipped and pulled off and something, okay, maybe. But he just saw
Well,
a mother taking their kids, and he just busts right in.
and again, this is common sense, much less someone who's supposed to be a Jedi with good common sense. It's kind of like, okay, so you're all hot and heavy on trying to grab this kid and take this kid back with you. You know, you would think what would have happened later is what should have happened first, which would have been, yeah, I get how important it is, but we got to actually test the kid before we figure out if this is even worth our effort. And it's like he was kind of just disregarding that until later when they decided, oh yeah, we better test him. And it's kind of, again, just there's a lot of weird things going on here that I just felt like were out of character for Jedi characters.
Yeah. Okay, so then after he does that, he gets back to the ship and he's telling Endara, he's saying he's seen them and he says something like, they do not treat the girls like children. And I'm thinking, I heard him say that. And I'm like thinking, that's exactly how they were treating them.
Yeah,
She's first, Corin scolded them to, what are they doing out in the open? And then when he spied on him, he saw the mother teaching him, obviously using the Force, but in a teaching way, the power of two and blah, blah, blah. So how is that not treating them like children? That's exactly how they were treating them like children. But he says they weren't treating them like children. And Dara says, well, let me check with the council. And then Soul instantly goes into they're in danger or something like that. The girls are in danger. I fear for their safety. They're preparing for a ceremony. Where does he come up with all of that? You know, where does he see that they're in danger? Where does he? And I didn't see them. Okay, maybe he saw them chanting at the well or whatever. But how does he know they're preparing for a ceremony? How does he know all this? What makes him assume all that? Just like you said, it goes from either bad writing to making him look like a complete doofus.
yep.
It's like a character assassination of Soul. He's been like one of my favorite characters, and it's like, Soul, what are you doing?
Yeah, it doesn't add up, right?
So he gets them all, and before they can get word from the council, these Jedi, supposed Jedi, like you said earlier, they just seem to be working on emotion. Instead of waiting, they just take off again. And Dara, who's supposed to be in charge, says, I'm going to go in alone. And once again, Soul says, we need to go together. And she goes, okay.
Well, and that leads to the next thing that I made a note of. once they get there, she directs Kalnaka to effectively break into the compound yet again.
Exactly. They don't. Okay, they're there. Why don't they knock? Push a button, something.
Exactly. None of that. That's why I said it's very clear that any Jedi, certainly anything that we were led to believe historically, would have methodically thought this out and said, okay, we're gonna make an attempt to reach out to him. They may close the doors. We'll make another follow-up attempt, but it just feels overboard again. Why? And this goes to another point, which is, I followed the old legacy stuff. I haven't really followed a lot of Disney stuff in terms of literature and the comics,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it makes me wonder to what extent do the Jedi have? In other words, what is the Jedi's authority in this universe? I mean, what is it that they can and can't do? And you might have answered a little bit of it earlier, which is, yeah, they can test the kids, but they can only take them with the consent of the
yeah.
family or the parents.
Well, even in Dar says we have the right to test them with your permission, of course. So wait a minute. Do they have the right to test them? Or
Yeah, exactly.
what the hell does that mean?
Exactly. And again, there's that's just that's not really made quite clear. Is it optional or not? If I was the family, I'd say, well, which is it? Or I don't know. But
Yeah.
that again was another point of contention I had.
So just showing that part, the Jedi need permission, blah blah. It's kind of like it alleviated my fears in a certain sense because we know the rules are they shouldn't be taking them. Because even later on, she says the council won't let us take them. They won't let us separate them from the coven. They won't let us take them, split them apart. She says that, so it kind of leaves my fears of them making the Jedi these evil.
Oh, like kind of like a colonizer or a
Yeah, yeah. I was worried that's how they're going to portray them as colonizers, but obviously they're not. But it just goes to show this team here is a little. They're just not following the Jedi rules. The council
right,
said they don't, like Indar says, they don't want us to split them apart. They're not going to let us take them from their coven.
right.
But anyways, before we get to that, while they're still there, there was one cool part which I liked the way that Anastasia invaded Torben's mind. The way we saw it, she just kind of took him over right there, but actually she kind of did a Galadriel where she was already in his mind and took it over. I thought that was really well done the way they played it, and I actually think they could have used that more. Once he got released and they went back, he could have been having these. She could have still been in his mind somehow, or maybe he was having these night sweats or whatever because she had invaded his mind and that will cause him to run off. But no, they just drop it and he, later on he just rushes back. Oh, I got the virgins. Now we can go home. Blah blah blah.
From a writing standpoint, I imagine they probably said, well, Torben is he's not experienced enough. He's still a Padawan. He wouldn't have been able to resist her per se. But I say, if the kid's been like most Jedi would have been, he looked like he was clearly 16, 17, 18 years old at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, or older. And if he had been taken and been trained, he was a baby. To me, it was almost too effective that she was able to take over him so quickly. I thought there would have been a little more pushback initially. In my mind,
What I would counter that with would just be he'd be obviously the weakest of the three, being a Padawan,
yeah,
and if Mother Anastasia, she's obviously the most powerful. So if he wasn't prepared because he's inexperienced dealing with hostiles, obviously the way he's acting, he's never been away from Coruscant. He doesn't like being away. So I understand what you're saying, and I agree, which is why later on when he goes back and he says, "My mind is shielded," that just goes to show, okay, well, he's prepared now. He's
right.
training.
Well,
But at that time, you could just say, "Hey, she caught him off guard." Which, beyond that, I just like the way they did it, how they focused on just him and her, and how she was in his mind, and
Well, and I clearly get what they did by establishing that early on in the episode about his unhappiness of being there. So I see what they were trying to do. I guess I wasn't happy about the it happening so quickly. But then, like you said, I guess at the end or later on when he comes back and says, "Okay, I'm ready to go this time." That I guess that's all fair because he's still a kid in a sense, or still learning the Force.
Okay, so from there we go to the ship. We go to the ship, and what does Saul go into again? I feel the connection to Osha. And it's like Indara starts to say, okay, that was a good trick to get us out of there by saying we're going to test them. But if you listen to what she said, she goes, you can't take testing them seriously. She's too old. Maybe she's like she's imagining it's just a ruse to get out of there. But Soul's serious. He does want to test him. And Dara, she was just like she was basically saying, we can't take it seriously. Them testing them seriously. It's just it's just a way to get out of there. And then Soul keeps going on with out of the blue. I feel she's meant to be my Padawan. You know, and
Yeah.
she's too old. The council will never approve it.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. I mean, again, it's just odd behavior in my mind, especially for a Jedi Knight.
Yeah.
But
Here and Dar's like you said, she's probably the smartest and best of them. She's saying the Coven will never let her leave, which is good because by her saying that, obviously the Jedi just don't go stealing kids, which they kind of been hinting at. You know,
right.
the Coven will never let her leave, and then Soul just keeps going on, like I said, with his OSHA's not safe. The Jedi must protect him, and it's like, where is he coming from with all that? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's almost like he needs to go back to Jedi school, right? I mean, it's like kind of like, you mean to tell me they graduated you? It's kind of like he's not ready to even go out. I mean, it just again, it seems like a contradiction in terms of how the Jedi would act. I guess that sequentially, this is probably accurate, but then May starts the fire. So I looked at that scene a couple times because I thought, okay, what is it that she's holding?
Some
Why?
kind of book or something.
Well, there was, yeah, that, which obviously could be the fuel, in addition to whatever liquid was inside that. I don't know if that was supposed to be a lamp or something that had the illumination to it. But for it to fall, and then I looked at the walls again. Yeah, there were some control panels, but I mean, we're
It's
talking about
stone.
it's stone, exactly,
It's
and
stone.
it's stone and metal. And I thought one of two things would have happened: either the kid was sharp enough that they had some ability with the force. They clearly were pushing people around or doing some things, at some point during the series. But she almost just literally froze up. And to me, it just was a little contradictory again to the character because the kid was pretty impulsive. She would have done things. I don't necessarily see her freezing up. I could see her either fleeing or, which later she did, or just acting at the moment. And I think again, one, I have an issue with it just apparently burning the whole stone compound down,
Yeah.
or stone with metal.
But hang on, we'll
And
we'll get to that scene in just a
yeah,
second. Okay, but before that, okay, so the next day, and remember, I'd say about 50-60% of this we've already seen before, maybe just from a different viewpoint, but we've pretty much seen this. It was just a wasted episode in a certain sense. They might as well just showed it all at once. But anyways, so they go to be tested, and May's tested, and she does say one thing when she's talking about ascension. She misquotes her mother. Her mother had said, I wrote that down too. Her mother had said that it's about sacrificing a part of yourself to become part of the coven. Uh, you know, part of the group. But May tells Osha and May tells Solon and Dara that her mother says that everyone must be sacrificed, and they kind of look at each other. So it's obviously they're trying to hint that Soul is concerned for the girls because he's like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean we gotta sacrifice you? So but I just feel like okay, that maybe helps, but most of the other stuff makes no sense why he would be so concerned. You know, so
right.
but they test May, Osha, stuff we've already seen, and then after all that, Soul just again just like something is wrong, and then Dara's like, the council says no. They're not want to sever, which I thought was good because at least it shows the Jedi Council as being smart. And then uh, she just keeps going on, and Soul's Torben's like they're not safe, and and why is Soul so attracted? And then of course that's when they figure out that they're basically trying to hint that they're one person that's been split. At first, I thought they were going to say they were clones when they said they weren't made normally. I said,
Right.
"Oh, that they're clones," but then they're trying to say that I don't think that they're the Virgins. I think the Virgins is on the planet, but somehow they use that power to, unlike Anakin being the Virgins of himself, but they use that Virgin's power to split a person somehow. Um, I don't know. I just they leave so many questions. It's hard to say, but they're basically saying it's the same person but split into two bodies. And then from there, that's when Torben freaks out, and it just seemed odd. It's like, I'm gonna go get him. It's like, what is he gonna do? What is he gonna do? He goes,
He's gonna break in a third time. That's what he's gonna do.
yeah. So he goes back with Soul, and Soul uses his mind powers to see that Osha and May are fighting. I was like, okay, well, follow me. And they break in again, third time, like you said. And then Korn makes May get mad. This is before they actually get there. They're fighting with the mother Anastasia, saying she's going to let one of them go. And then the Coven's like, well, wait a minute. Are you our leader or your mother? You got to do what's right for the Coven. And I don't know. It's almost like Korn tells them, okay, go get ready for battle. But the mother's still there and the Messiah's still there. And then Korn tells May, get mad. Keep your sister here. Basically, which is hinting that they are using dark side power. And then that's when they show up. And then this is the odd part during their first encounter. Okay, Anastasia has basically told them that she's gonna let her go, but what does she do? She turns into some black goo, which looks dangerous, and May starts to vanish. So in a way, what is Soul supposed to think? But then again, why would he just instantly pull out his lightsaber and stab her?
I'm with you on both of those points. I don't get it. It's like she says one thing, does another, and then while she's trying to transform, I'm still thinking again. What good is Soul and his Jedi abilities? Apparently, he doesn't have very many good abilities because you would think, again, there's a perception issue. He could understand, was this more of an offensive or defensive action? And I clearly just see a disconnect there in terms of being able to display his abilities as a Jedi to interpret what those actions meant. I mean, everything that we've seen in other media, movies and stuff, they're like, oh, I sense this. Well, he wasn't apparently sensing Jack. So I don't get it. I really don't. It's
Yeah, and it just, again, going back to motivations changing so quick, and say it turns into the lost monster, and she's turning into black smoke, and then like I said, why did she just say, well, we're allowing Osha to leave? Why wouldn't she just tell him that there instead of doing that, and then say, have her get stabbed, and then say, well, we were going to let her go? It's like, well, why the hell did you say that in the first place? It's like, why make a big show about it? So then we get come back to some of the good parts of the episode, which, one thing you can say about this series is, like, most of the fights at least have been pretty cool. We get Torben doing his Anakin stopping all them arrows, and then Soul fighting off Korran without actually fighting her because he doesn't want to hurt her. And then we come to the next part. Korran vanishes into smoke, right? She does that, and then she says, "You shouldn't have brought him here. I warned you to bring him back or something." And we're led to assume that she's talking about Torben, that to get taken over, and then suddenly Kelnaka come in and he's taken over. But so it leads you to assume that she had somehow taken over Kelnaka, but no, she's just gone. She just dips. She just vanishes out. We don't see her after that. We don't see her one time. She just dipped out. She left them all there, and then we see that it's the Coven that's somehow controlling Kelnaka.
right.
You know what I'm saying? And we do get an epic little fight there with the Wookiee and everything. I loved all that part. I thought that was
Yeah.
pretty awesome. And then Trinity come flying in. She breaks the connection, and then they all die without any explanation of how they were doing it and why. Are they saying that they were in there, she pushed them out, knowingly killed them, or by breaking the psychic link they somehow died? They don't really explain it.
Unknown. Yeah, it's again poor job of explaining what's going on in the show.
So that's a quick way to kill them all off. And then we come to the part what you were talking about. It's a freaking stone place. Okay, you did notice, like what you said, it was a lamp or something. There was obviously some liquid in there, and you could see it spraying across the floor. Okay, and then of course it gets into the panel and everything. But for everything just to go instantly blowing up like that, again, when we saw the episode in episode 3, I was like, okay, there's got to be something else more to it. It can't just be that fire. It gets way out too fast. But no, it really is just that fire. It went up the walls on the stone. They said it was an old abandoned quarry, so obviously they were digging it out of stone.
Yeah.
and it just, like I said, that didn't make any sense right there.
Well, so again, what I was going to say earlier was it was two things there. One, I just had an issue with it sort of being stone and metal that just caught fire and just, the whole place basically blows up as a result. But the other part of that was, is again, going to sort of the mindset of May. I don't necessarily see her freezing up. I would have seen her either running away like she did, but for a moment there, she had an opportunity. She could have put it out. I think she could have
Yep.
extinguished it with the powers that she did have. It was pretty clear both of those kids had more than potential. So it just again felt like, okay, you're just using this as a plot device to move the show forward, but it really doesn't make much sense.
You've said that before. They do stuff, and it's like they do it just as a plot device, just to move the story. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. It feels out of character. Just doing. They do stuff like that just to move the story along onto the next. Uh, the next thing.
Yep.
All right. So from there, okay. So they
Oh,
and
can I mention something real quick?
yeah, go for it. Anything.
Another point that I had written down. I was just thinking about this again. Uh, Kind of going back to the point where Saul had ignited his lightsaber, killed the leader there, the main mom, right?
Yeah.
So there was a moment where I kind of thought for a sec back to Kamir or the stranger. He didn't appear in this episode, but he apparently made it sound as if he knew what had happened on Brendock, right? Because he was saying, he said it
Exactly.
when he said, well, basically, hey, I know what happened and you screwed up. And I'm thinking, well, if this was supposed to be quote unquote a secret, and apparently it was maintained for all these years amongst just those four people, how would he know? How would he know this?
Exactly.
I know he's trained as a Jedi, but there's, as well as I do, they've said for years, what are there, thousands? There's 10,000 Jedi or something. It's kind of like,
Well, that goes back to when he says I'm a Jedi and Osha goes, I never heard of you. It's like, damn, would you know all thousands of Jedi? No.
right. It's just, so then I'm thinking, okay, so how would he know? And I don't know if they're going to ever go back to that, or that was just something that was dropped into the script. I don't know. But
Well, here's something you mentioning that makes me think. In the last episode, when Soul's talking he goes, May, I wanted to tell you this. Wondered how I'd explain it to you for 16 years. Like, why would you explain it to her? She was right there. She saw you stab her mother. What are you going to explain?
It just doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. And that's, again, goes to, it's, I guess if each of these episodes were standalone, that's one thing, but they're all supposed to tie together as one series. I don't know.
It's almost like, they got a separate writer to write each episode. Like, well, don't pay attention to what happened to the last episode.
Yeah, we're just going to introduce new ideas, new concepts. Just go with that for this episode, and then forget about all that when we get to the one after that.
So yeah, that happens a lot where people know stuff that how would they know and it's not explained. Like you said with the stranger, and another thing, like I said, when he says about Yord, oh, but he was going to arrest you. How would he know he was going to arrest her? When he first met her, he didn't know anything about her,
right?
Because when he meets her for the first time, he even says, "Oh, he's like surprised to meet her." But anyways, going back to this episode, yeah, it seems silly when that he told May last episode, I've been wondering how to explain this for 6 years. It's like, dude, I was right there. I saw you stab my mother. What are you going to tell me?
Nothing new
But
here.
It could have been, maybe he was talking about this part, which is the next part. After Indara kills all the coven, she sends Soul to get the girls. Now he shows up, and there's a lot of debate online about this, on why he didn't just, instead of trying to lift the both sides of the scaffolding, why didn't he just lift the girls?
I was going to mention the same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we get to that part, and there could be a little debate on that, in the sense that, okay, why didn't Obi-Wan use the speed run when he was up there on the, to catch up to Qui-Gon and Maul? Why didn't he use the speed run? Well, the answer is using the Force isn't unlimited. It does tire you out, which even Yoda after he's expended energy, he gets tired. You do get tired using the Force. In that episode, in that scene from episode 1, Obi-Wan had just fallen off a long plank and used the Force jump to jump all the way back up. Maybe he wasn't quote unquote charged up in the Force enough to make that speed run. So there's a reason why he didn't use it. So Soul was just in a big fight, gets got thrashed around by a Wookiee. So maybe his power was a little diminished. He hadn't, he was tired. After using the Force, you get a little tired. So that's probably why. But even if you go that route and try to explain it that way, he could have just Force pushed them both backwards. On because the scaffolding tipped down. But why didn't you just push them back up a little bit? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean that's a fair point. I'll give him that. I mean, I didn't like it. I thought the same thing. Like, why couldn't he have just pulled both? But I guess if you make that argument, and he's not a Jedi master, he's still a knight, and we clearly see he's got some deficits. He's not quite a big boy just yet, So, if that's the case, then okay, I'll defer there on that for the moment.
Yeah, but then he makes a choice to save one of them over the other, which I don't know. I guess but it just goes back to his why. What is his weird obsession with OSHA? You know what I'm
Yeah, I
saying?
don't know. That's a good question.
Okay, so he saves OSHA, and then they get back to the ship. This is where it gets a little bizarre because it's like they basically, Kelnaka's upset, but everyone's upset, but they basically collude with each other to tell this lie. Now, I tried to talk to you before we do this show. That way we could get everything out here. But we did talk right after the show because it was just so crazy. And one of the things I said is like, well, I could understand why Dara would say, you're just going to let this girl stream die. And you were more on the sense that it didn't make sense. The more I've thought about it, the more I agree with you that it doesn't make sense that Soul should have went and faced the council. And if there are so many of the Jedi, plus who's to say the council would even say they'd let her train because they denied her. They said she was too old. So
yeah,
you know what I'm
and
saying?
so to carry that thought one step further, he would have been held accountable. Likely, Andara would have as well for pulling that nonsense. And then, by basically saying, well, we're going to just tell him the truth, wink, wink, this is what we're going to tell him. And then on top of it, again, if it was that big of an issue, I don't see how any of them would have really been emotionally attached in a matter of days. I would argue 3 to 4 days, probably, that all that took place. And even if it was stretched over a week, that's still not a ton of time. You could bring the kids back and just say, hey, we did our job. We saved them. And now they just get placed with someone else, regardless if they show
Force sensitivity.
yeah, because they're more than likely not the only kids that have ever been found that were too old or had other issues going on in their life, and the council said no, we're not going to train them. So
Yeah.
they would have just probably gone and someone else would have raised them. The other thing it was, I had to laugh as we were going over this. I thought, the writer must have been a Seinfeld fan because it almost feels like Master Andara was using the Costanza theory, which was it's only a lie if you believe it's a lie. And I'm thinking, really, come on. But
I made a comment when I talked to you before that it felt like the Clinton days where, okay, well, a half truth is a truth, just because I didn't tell you the rest of it. But yeah, the more I thought about it, it's like it didn't make sense that they would lie like that. It goes against the Jedi code.
yeah,
But
and
like I said, okay, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say that, I could see if one person, in this case, the Padawan, was a little, emotionally connected or disconnected based on the issue. But in this case, the whole team was flawed, and it just didn't make any sense. I don't know.
Okay, so now let's get to this. A little bit of overview in the sense. Okay, you said the whole team was flawed, except for maybe Kelnaka.
Yeah, but that's why subtitles would help, because then I could find out what his motivations were.
Yes, but he goes. Okay, basically, when we start the show, they're all, well, at least Corbin and Kelnaka have basically, how would you say, they've pulled a Yoda and gone into exile. Kelnok on some planet just off, and they even mentioned he's been gone. They haven't heard from him for a long time, and then
Yeah.
Corbin had taken that vow of silence. Okay, why would Kilnaka be so upset? I mean, is it just because he knows the lie? Because he didn't actually really do anything wrong. You know what I'm saying?
No,
He
no, you could argue
he
he
got
was a
taken
victim.
over, but
Yeah,
that's
you could
about
argue
it.
he was victimized. You could argue that, but I think that's the only thing that makes sense. He would have to have been just ashamed that
He didn't want
was
to
com-
rat out, be a rat.
he was complicit with the lie, and so that probably just and also for Torben it was the same thing, and that's maybe why he did the same thing, I guess, which was to sort of isolate or
Have
go
I been
off
saying
and
Corbin? I meant Torben.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but even so, he really did nothing wrong. Really, I mean, he set up the chain of events, but it was really Soul. It wasn't him. It was really Soul that did it all, not Torben.
Well, I'll tell you this from a certain point of view. Yes, you could argue that Soul was the problem here, but as someone who used to be a supervisor, I would say really it ultimately falls on Indara because really she's the one that maintains responsibility for the whole team. So, in the fact that she didn't automatically set him on a course correction means that she really was responsible for all of this,
Yeah, she was a
because
bad teacher in a
well,
sense.
she certainly was a bad supervisor. In this case, a bad Jedi Master who was leading a team on an unknown planet, and so that's why, from that perspective, I think, oof, that certainly tells you that from the top down there were problems on that team, and I don't know if that's a standard Jedi team, but anyhow, it just
Yeah,
seems like
but going back to the point, it's like, why would he feel so bad to take a vow of silence? And then, okay, you could make the claim that, okay, same thing with Kelnaka. He just felt guilty about the lying about killing all those people. But even if you go that far, why would he commit suicide over it? That's a pretty. I don't like the fact that they had a Jedi commit suicide in the first place. I thought that was the completely out of code. But even if you say, okay, that's fine, for him to do that, it just seemed like he should have had much more to do with it than just what he did.
well for them to, I don't know, for them to sort of isolate themselves just for the cover up of the lie. Maybe that they felt that was potentially the best way to handle the situation. But I agree, for him to go as far as taking his own life seemed a little bit extreme, unless maybe he had gotten to the point as a Jedi Master that he felt that would undermine all his teachings and all the students that he had had, and so maybe he felt as though that would have just brought more disgrace to
Shame,
himself, I
disgrace.
guess. But
Yeah,
yeah, I don't
I could
know.
see that. I could see that.
See. I don't really necessarily see suicide as take out of Jedi code, only because that's never, to me, it's never been something I've seen that or read that was explored. So I've always
Well, but if they say that the Jedi is about life and blah blah blah, preserving and this, it just seems to me, it just seems
yeah.
out of character.
Well, but because
Not that saying taking your life would be a Sith thing. Obviously not, because they're a lot more
right.
they're a lot more selfish and no, you know what I'm saying.
I guess if
Uh,
you're doing it for a noble cause, and that's why, being that the Jedi were sort of based on samurai, I'm like, yeah, okay, I could kind of see that, right? But again, this all seems very extreme based on what happened. In other words,
yes,
right, doing what they did just seemed again out of place in general with how a
the
Jedi would have conducted themselves.
the two that had the technically the least amount to do with it, they're the ones that alienated themselves. They're the ones that sequestered themselves either by not talking or, in Kanauka's way, going off into some strange planet. And the two that had the most to do with it, they just lived their lives, had their Padawans, and blah blah blah. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
and this is sort of a behind the scenes look. Both of them actually had makeup or costuming attached to them. So in a way, it was a convenient way not to inflate the budget anymore. I guess, I don't know. Maybe so you didn't have to have a lot of screen time for Kawanaka or Torben, who had I think he had, which wasn't great makeup, by the way, in that whatever episode that was, episode
Oh, with the
one.
scar.
well, not just the scar, but he had some like longer hair. He looked like supposed to look like an older man, but it just
Yeah,
didn't look very
he just should
convincing.
have been bald, bro.
Yeah, yeah.
Cut the
So
comb over, baby.
yeah. Well, it just again though the whole thing just seemed odd, like you said. And then I guess Andara was kind of doing her thing. I didn't really necessarily get the sense she was isolated, but obviously,
Nope,
I obviously May had caught her at a time where she was alone, but that didn't mean that she was trying to avoid or hide from anyone.
nope.
So
She's out there on adventures, and Soul, he's off teaching Jackie. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
right, right. Yeah, hey, it's unfortunate. I think this show. I know we're not at the end yet. I mean, there's one more episode, but I just feel like the show itself has had some potential. I mean, certainly as a Star Wars fan, I could see certain plot points or certain things that I saw that I said, "Oh, I'd like to know more about that." But all that, as we've
Yeah,
said,
even with the stranger, that got a little interesting for me, anyways.
uh huh,
Hearing
uh
his
huh,
story, like I said, I agree with you in his acting in certain spots. Him being a Point Break straight out of Point Break, but for the most part, I actually started to like him as a character. I felt he did it. It didn't make sense. OSHA kind of talking to him and not being so upset after he killed them all, but I like the way they showed him as manipulating her. I thought he did a pretty good job, but that's just what's crazy. It's like you start to turn the corner with this series. Like, okay, find something that people start to like. You go back to a flashback episode, which pretty much, if you look at it, 50% of this episode we had seen already. You know, it was the same scenes. We got a little extra stuff too, but basically 50% of that episode was episode 3, and
yeah.
and now we got one more left, which is probably going to be 30 minutes too. You know, how in the world are they supposed to wrap all that up? You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
that's why I'm wondering if Disney's already greenlit internally. They've greenlit the second season. So what may end up happening is it ends on some sort of semi cliffhanger. You know.
Yeah, I don't know. And then between me and you, now that we saw that, what's her name, Corin, uh,
Who?
the second in command of the witches.
Oh, right. Uh huh.
I think it's Corin.
She's the same of Darth Maul's race.
Yeah, I'm almost 100% now that she's going to be the stranger's teacher.
You think so?
Well, it only makes sense. She escaped. She would know all this that would happen. You know what I'm saying? To set him on the path
Oh, you mean as a dark side user,
as a
not
dark side user.
yeah.
Yeah, as
Well,
somehow
that's
the stranger's
possible.
teacher.
Well, let's just say she's not. We're not done seeing her yet. In other words,
Yeah,
certainly she may make a reappearance in either real time or in a flashback again in the last episode. Is that what you're thinking?
I don't know because obviously the stranger is not the master. I'm thinking he's an apprentice, and so who's his master? Who trained him in the dark side? Obviously, we know he's a fallen Jedi. He's been gone from the Jedi a long
Yeah.
time.
Well, we'll
Uh,
see. We'll see that in the second season. I guess that's what they're. But I don't even know if I have any interest to see the second season at this
I
point.
don't
But
know. I don't know if there could be a second season. I mean, I've seen a lot of even people that were like defending the show on board this past episode just because of how they showed the Jedi and a lot of things. It's like a lot of people jumped off board. I mean, it's still it's crazy. What I said earlier about the division between old fans and new fans, that's very much true because the new Disney fans, they love this and they think it's the greatest thing ever. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
well, I'm sure Disney is just hoping us older fans die off at some point, which we will. But that's another story. I just I can understand why a different generation may see this differently. But what I don't understand, and you started the top of the show with this, which was why all the vitriol, why all the hate, the animosity. To me, that all that has shown to me is it's kind of taken a page from Star Wars. It's all like Sith vibes, and I mean in the sense that it's like all this negativity that these people are pushing, as opposed to just being able to sit down and have a conversation. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's just a matter of just trying to do an examination of the show and trying to be honest to
yeah,
what you've known for 40 plus years and what you're seeing in front of you. So
Yeah, you say that, and I know we've talked about Star Wars theory before. You know who that is.
yeah,
I see I see posts ripping him all the time, and so I like he'll say something, and they'll someone will make a post about him. Why is this guy still around? Why is he watching this if he doesn't like it? And then I responded to one of them the other day. I was like, I see more posts about people that supposedly hate Star Wars from the people that supposedly love Star Wars than them. I see more hate posts about Star Wars theory. I see more about Star Wars theory from the people that hate them than I do from Star Wars theory. You know what I'm saying? It's
yeah,
like they talk so much about if you hate it, why are you watching it? And they make all these posts about it. It's like, okay, well, if you don't like him, why are you even dealing with it? Just ignore him. You know, I see lots of people that you know, something says something that just completely, I'll block them if it's that bad, or otherwise I'll just ignore them. I got into it today with somebody about, just as a side note, real quick. Somebody was posting that they should have recast T'Challa, and they were trying to make it a racist thing. Like, why can they recast Ross with Harrison Ford? That doesn't make sense. And I was like, and he was like, well, T'Challa's a much bigger character. Black Panther, they should have recast it. I'm like, I told him, I was like, okay, I'm not saying they should or shouldn't have, but the point is, who who knows who Ross is? I bet you take a poll, most people don't even know that character. You know what
yeah.
I'm saying? Whereas Chadwick Boseman was loved. It would have been hard to replace him. Either way, imagine them
Well,
replacing. There would have been an outcry from somebody.
well, and just from an operational standpoint, they were planning on building a franchise around that character and specifically that actor, where they are not going to be doing that with the Ross character and those, regardless if it's Thunderbolt Ross or regardless if it's the Red Hulk, it's not going to be one of those where I think he gets a standalone. They're not going to build a
Yeah,
franchise
of
around him. So,
course.
so,
No, no,
so
like I
there
said,
is a
I'm not saying they should or shouldn't have recast each other. That's not the point. The point is, it's like what I'm saying is like what you say is like just so much vitriol. Anyways, when I said that, I got attacked. It's like I got called a Disney. Oh, he's just a Disney shill, and he's defending them. I was like, what are you talking about, bro? It's like,
different.
aren't we just having a discussion?
Well, you know what that boils down to in some cases is it could be a misinterpretation or misunderstanding of your viewpoint because some people really are not listening. They may hear you, but they're not listening to what you're saying. Or it could just be sometimes people just love to hate, right? In other words, they do that so they can see their post get either liked or commented on, and so for them that's the thrill. So
Yeah, I
it's
suppose you're right.
that's part of the sickness in today's society, in my opinion. But anyhow,
Yeah. Anyway, just to wrap up this episode, we've gone a lot longer than we normally do. This is like super long compared to normal. Just to wrap up this episode, like I said, I was worried before it came on because I thought, okay, well, if they show the Jedi as this colonizers, try to make them evil, I'm just probably I'd probably be done with the series, and I'd probably be done. I walked away from DC Comics about a year ago, new DC Comics, and I never thought I would do that. And I was like, okay, well, if it comes to that, they ruined Luke, they ruined the Jedi. What is there left of Star Wars? So, like I said, I'm glad they didn't go that far. The council was actually saying we're not going to do this. It was more of this group. So in that sense, I wasn't as upset, but obviously, like what we were talking about, just as an overall, this group was kind of a like you said, the Keystone Cops.
well, alrighty, it's been a pleasure once again. But yeah, I think I think we did a pretty good job of analyzing not just this episode, but some other bigger issues that are maybe going on within the community. So I look forward to wrapping things up next week, and then we'll go from there.
All right, Polly. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
All right, you too.
And for everybody else, thanks again for joining me and Paul, Darth Sartan. Uh, Go ahead, like, subscribe, make a comment. I appreciate anybody's comments, whether you agree with me or disagree, whether you like this show or don't like this show. Like I said, everyone's welcome here. Just all I ask is just to keep it civil. We like to have a good time, and if you hate this show, that's okay. If you love this show, that's okay too. Um, I think most people are in between, or actually, it seems like most people are one or the other. But, anyways, once again, thanks for joining me for Jedi Business. See you next time.